Good morning, William! That's pretty loud in this room. Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your vacation or enjoyed it by the time you watch this. And we're going to do the Oregon Trail.
Yeehaw!
All right, so let's buckle up.
Woo!
Chapter 5, Pioneers Taking the Trail West. The ancestors that hugged parents and grandparents wiped away their tears and set out for a new world. Now another generation of men, women, and children was heading out toward a little-known world. They too were leaving parents and grandparents, often never to see them again. They were heading west. For some it would be a great adventure. Some would not live to finish the journey. Dun, dun, dun. They were going for the reasons that usually make people move, because they wanted a better life for themselves and their children, or because they were adventurous or restless. They went in trim wooden-wheeled wagons pulled by oxen or mules. The wagons were called schooners, named after the two-mast ships that sailed out of New England's ports. These were prairie schooners, and they weren't fast. But when the wind blew over the prairies and filled the canvas that roofed the wagons, they seemed almost to be sailing across the waves of prairie grass. They called themselves immigrants because they were leaving the United States. Pioneers, for that is what we call them now, were going west to places they had heard about from wandering mountain men or from traders or from newspaper articles, many of which were written by people who had never left home. They went due west. They were heading for foreign lands, Mexican, California, or the territory of Oregon. Oregon was claimed by England and the United States. Most had no intention of settling in the U.S.-owned Louisiana territory. They all knew about what Stephen Long had said about that region. It was a depression that got many of them started. A depression is a time of economic hardship when money seems to disappear and jobs do too. In 1837, the United States entered a terrible depression. In New York and Philadelphia and Baltimore, thousands had no jobs. Banks closed and people lost their savings. The price of corn and wheat fell below the cost of growing it. Many farmers who had borrowed money to buy farming equipment and seeds couldn't pay back the loans, so they lost their farms. What could they do? They could sell whatever they had left and use the money to head west, where land was free and fertile and opportunities seemed to be waiting. And in 1843, that was just what some people began to do. They went west on the Oregon Trail. Many of them never made it. They weren't prepared for the hard journey, for rain that soaked through the canvas cover of the prairie schooner, for biting cold and burning heat, for hunger and accidents and disease. They brought the disease with them from the east. It was called cholera. And it had come from Europe with the immigrants. It went west as they did, and it was a killer. The trails became lined with graves. Mothers and fathers buried their children. Sometimes children buried their parents. But they began the trip with optimism. They were looking for adventure. Most were young. Many of the mothers and fathers were still teenagers. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they added children as they went west. 1 in 5 of the women is said to have been pregnant on some part of the journey. Their babies were born in the hard-floored schooners or in tents or in the out of doors. The children would remember the fun and the freedom of the trip. Martha Morrison went west to the Oregon Territory in 1844 when she was 13. We did not know the dangers we were going through. The idea of my father was to get on the coast. No other place suited him. and he went right ahead until he got there. We went down the river, the chutes in an open canoe, including all the children. And when we got down there was no way to get to the place where my father was determined to locate us, but to wade through the tremendous swamps. I knew some of the young men that were along laughed at us girls, my older sister and me, for holding up what dress we had to keep from murring, but we did not think it was funny. For most pioneers, the journey west began in St. Louis. The pioneer family might have traveled from the East Coast on the Erie Canal and then overland, and then down the Ohio River and across the Mississippi. St. Louis, where the Missouri River meets the Mississippi, was now the gateway west. Pioneers who had money could take a steamboat from St. Louis up the Mississippi River and head for a jumping off town like Independence, Missouri, or Council Bluffs, Iowa. There they could buy supplies and team up with other immigrants. Francis Parkman, who had come from Boston, described Independence in 1846. The town was crowded. A multitude of shops had sprung up to furnish the emigrants and Santa Fe traders with the necessaries for their journey. And there was an incessant hammering and banging from a dozen blacksmith sheds, where the heavy wagons were being repaired and the horses and oxen shod. The streets were thronged with men, horses, and mules. While I was in the town, a train of emigrant wagons from Illinois passed through to join the camp on the prairie and stopped in the principal street. A multitude of healthy children's faces were peeping out from under the covers of the wagons. Usually only the smallest children and the sick got to ride in the wagons. There was no room for anyone else. The wagons weren't as big as the heavy Conestogas the Pennsylvania Dutch used back east. A Conestoga is a type of wagon. It's a famous big wagon. The prairie schooners had to be lightweight so they wouldn't exhaust the oxen on the long pull ahead. Besides, there was so much to take that they were always filled. Pretend you were leaving home, perhaps forever. What will you take with you? You need food on your trip. Flour, beans, bacon, coffee, dried fruit, sugar, salt and vinegar. Sheep, goats, cows, and chickens will come along. You will need clothes. Your mother packs pants, shirts, dresses, and some cloth to make clothes for you children as you grow. Into the wagon go pots, pans, water kegs, tea kettles, and chamber pots to use along the way, and axes, plows, and saws for the new life that is ahead of you. There are books, a Bible, school books, and storybooks. Your parents are musical. Your father has brought his violin. He calls it a fiddle. Your mother has packed a harmonica. In the evening around the campfire, they entertain the others. There was still more in the wagon. Favorite family portrait, a mirror, and a rocking chair. There were guns, medicines, and spare parts for wagon repairs. You brought a hoop and some marbles. Your sister has brought a doll, the baby, a rattle. When the oxen are exhausted and lie dying by the trail, your parents will sell the plow, the axe, the books, and the tea kettle, get 2 meals for them, and be lucky. The cows will be gone, eaten when there was no game to be shot. The portrait and the rocking chair are gone also, left under a tree, perhaps for Indians to find. As you climb into the Rockies, everything that's unnecessary weight must be left behind. Your lives may depend on that. Okay, I think that's it.
That's it?
All right. hope you enjoyed about having fun going west. Bye.